Okay, excellent. Hello, my name is Brandon Lee, and I will be your presenter for today. The title of today's presentation is Cultivating a Growth Mindset in Dietetics Education. So let's go ahead and get started. Excellent. So before we actually get into me, I do want to just go over our learning objectives for today. So the learning objectives for today are after attending today's virtual growth mindset presentation, SUNY Oneonta undergraduate and graduate students will be able to explain the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. The second objective is that SUNY Oneonta students will be able to identify 5 skills required to cultivate a growth mindset. And lastly, our last learning objective here is that Oneonta students will be able to describe strategies and implement a growth mindset during their supervised experiential learning, or SEL. So, just a little bit background on me. So, my name is Brandon Lee. I am a registered dietitian. I am also licensed to practice in the state of North Carolina, which is where I am currently located. Although it is kind of temporary, I will get into that in just a little bit. I am also a certified clinical research professional, and I have been a dietitian now for 5 years. So as you can see here, I am a SUNY Oneonta alumni. I was there from 2013 all the way to 2018. And I graduated with my bachelor's in December 2016 and my master's of science in 2018. And I was a part of the combined program, as we called it then, the dietetic internship, but now the SEL, and also did the master's coursework. And currently, I am a doctoral student at Pennsylvania Western University. So I will be getting my DHSC in 2026. So just winding back the clocks, 2013 to 2018, I must say I really cherished the time that I had in the program at Oneonta. Let me just make this full screen, pardon me. I really cherished the time that I had in the Oneonta undergraduate and master's program. Both really just laid the foundation for all the successes I've had in my career to date. So you can see on the left-hand side here, we have some photos. Dr. Bush is there, Dr. Jurzinski, and some of my favorite courses include in nutritional assessments, which I had with Dr. Martin, medical nutrition therapy 1 and 2, which I had with Dr. Hilpert and Dr. Bush, respectively, if memory serves correctly. And so those were really good. And I also enjoyed Dr. Jurzinski's class, Food Service Systems Management. So this is all assuming the course titles haven't changed, but I'm sure the topics are still the same. And so they were really beneficial for me early in my dietetics education journey and really laid a foundational knowledge for me. I was also the Nutrition for Performance Club leader from fall 2015 to spring 2016. And I helped to organize the Sports Nutrition Expo for spring 2015 and spring 2016. And so those were great events. It was great to collaborate with my fellow students, collaborate with Sodexo on campus, collaborate with the student athletes and do educations, and just a lot of different things happened and a lot of growth and learning. And you're going to notice with today's presentation topic that that is going to be the motif, is growing and learning and focusing on those things rather than just performance and grades. Along here. So here's just me again, just kind of how Prezi works. So let's just do a quick snapshot of the past 5 years since I've graduated Oneonta. So one of the first position that I got right outside of school was with a company called Nutrisource RD, which is now called Nutrico. And they just gave me a lot of long-term care experience. So I worked in a nursing home and rehabilitation facility and got long-term care experience there. At the same time, I was also teaching at Dutchess Community College. So I am from the Dutchess County area, if anyone else here is, and got exposure to academic instruction there as well. And so that was a little bit more of a part-time position, but definitely enjoyed my time there and the connections that I made. And then for the past 3.5 years before my current position, I was in Sacramento, California. So I moved there out of New York, went to Sacramento, California, and there gained some research experience, particularly in one facility titled the Western Human Nutrition Research Center, which is a USDA research center, USDA funded research center. And so had a lot of good um, research experience there, especially around study design, good networking. And so, as you can see, my professional experience has been quite diverse, and it will look that way for a lot of you. My current position is with the Houston Astros. That is my employer. And so that is a baseball team. So that means I'm in sports nutrition or sports dietetics. And sports nutrition is where I wanted to work for a long time since undergraduate. I'm currently working on getting my hours so I can take the test to become a board certified specialist in sports dietetics. And so I've always wanted to work in sports dietetics, as I mentioned, since undergraduate. And you can see here with my professional experience that there's really a non-linear path to get here. And you're going to find this story with a lot of dietitians, and I'm no exception. Although at the same time, you'll find other individuals that get these sort of opportunities sooner rather than later. I currently have a coworker, and she was employed with Houston Astros right out of school. So specifically with the Houston Astros, I am not with the major league team. I am with the minor league team, a high A team in North Carolina called the Asheville Tourists, and I am their dietitian. And so currently we are in the baseball season, and so we are really in the swing of things. And so each one of these areas really just gave me different exposure to different practice settings that I would not have gotten otherwise. And so I would not change my professional experience at all. I think one thing naturally led into the next, and it all worked out for the best. So that's a little bit about me. Let's start to transition into your SEL, your supervised experiential learning. So starting here, we're just taking a quick snapshot of the Academy's career development guide, and we're kind of zoomed in on it. But you'll see that from the bottom to the top, it starts with novice and makes its way all the way up to expert level. And as you continue your educational journey, because we're always lifelong learners, you're going to notice that it's really not so much about who's successful and unsuccessful. It's not who wins and loses as you go into your dietetics journey. It's more about learners and non-learners. And focusing on the learning process will help you to make your way from novice to expert, even as I do it now myself. And so those are the things you're going to want to keep in mind. Your instructors and your preceptors are there to help train you to become competent practitioners. And so you want to use them as a resource as much as possible. So let's just go over some of the general challenges and obstacles during supervised experiential learning. And if you're an undergraduate student and you're not sure where you're going to be doing this, you can substitute the SEL for practicums. I know some courses require you to get out into the field, into the community, or food service operations, and you will experience some of these. And first and foremost is the fact that there is a shortage of supervised sites, of places that have the capacity to take on students. So, as an example, in 2016, 50% of students that applied for internships, as they were called then, were not matched. And there is a direct correlation between that and the shortage of supervised practice sites. Another area of challenge is going to be assimilation to the organizational culture. Everywhere does somewhere different. And I've seen that myself working in different practice areas. How things are run in the nursing home is vastly different than how things are run at the research facility, which is vastly different than things how are run in a sports organization. And assimilating to those organizational cultures and understanding how to operate within them can be an obstacle, especially in your earliest months of that new position. Application of knowledge in more that you learned in a formal setting, but now applying to a field setting or a practice setting. And so you might really have good conceptual knowledge of X, Y, and Z in the classroom, but then applying it in a practice setting is very different. And so that can be another area of challenge. And then fourth here on the list is prioritizing and lifestyle modification. Things again look very different once you're in the field practicing, you're doing rotations or you're in your practicums, and things need to be reprioritized and what you focus on. And so that can take some time to wrap your mind around and really how to strategize, how you prioritize can be difficult, but it is very achievable. So, imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, defined as the notion that otherwise competent and qualified individuals feel that they have secured esteemed roles or professional positions because of some oversight or just plain luck. Therefore, they feel like frauds or imposters. So, in a study conducted by researchers interested in imposter syndrome in the dietetics profession, they did a cross-sectional survey and found that RDs, students, and interns, that 62% of them demonstrated characteristics associated with imposter syndrome. And if you just examine student interns in the survey, 95% of them had moderate to severe imposter syndrome. And so that is just a quick little snapshot of how rampant imposter syndrome is in just our own field, and certainly a challenge, an obstacle that needs to be overcome. It takes a lot of work to become a registered dietitian, and it takes a lot of work to remind yourself that in any practice setting where you are, or in your rotations, that's where you are supposed to be and that you earned it. Next here is a change in work ethic and communication style. You'll quickly find that a work ethic or communication style that works in an academic setting is not always going to translate well into other practice settings. And so that's an area of consideration. And there are certain things you can do to prepare for it, but more than likely, you just need to have the open mindedness and flexibility to adapt once in that new setting. Next is stress management. This almost goes without saying that stress management needs to be a practice throughout your entire career, and it needs to start now. This is the time to start now. So certainly something to keep in mind. We could do an entire thing on stress management, but we'll leave it there for now. Networking and professional development efforts. And so this is going to be something that have to become a priority as you start to enter the field. You're going to want to try and actively network with other individuals. You cannot be siloed, and start to develop your professional skills in this area. Next will be some financial considerations and constraints that can come up. Unfortunately, most SELs will not provide any sort of compensation, and so that is an area to try and navigate. And so that looks different for everyone. Family dynamics, that'll be another thing they have to take into consideration, whatever your situation may be, and how you prioritize and modify your lifestyle in regards to your family and family demands and duties. And then lastly, maintaining your wellness wheel during this entire process and beyond is going to be so important. That includes your physical, emotional, mental, environmental, spiritual, occupational, financial, and intellectual wellness all need to be taken into consideration on a near daily basis. So let's look at some essential attributes of students in a supervised experiential learning. And here in particular, I'm looking at one study. This study analyzed personal attributes of successful students as perceived by dietetic internship directors and preceptors. And this is the list that they formed from most important to least important. However, there's 10 here. They're all important. So starting right at the top is being motivated and essentially being a go-getter the moment you step in the door. Actually, it happens even before then. It happens in all your preparation work and being intrinsically motivated to be the best that you can be when you show up. Next is completion of tasks. So completing something when you say you're going to do it, and that ties into dependability. So being dependable and honoring your word, they found to be the top three most desirable attributes in students during an SEL, an internship as they called it at the time, but the equivalency. Fourth is being respectful to coworkers, preceptors, everyone, patients, clients, guests, and having a positive attitude going in, and essentially with a glass half full attitude is going to be essential. So those are your top five. And then if we keep going, being flexible, that's so important. Being able to just pivot on a dime is a real skill that actually has to be refined with practice. And it doesn't always just come naturally to everyone. Sometimes some people are better at it, but that's not always the case. And even those that are better at it still need to work at it. And it all starts in the mind. Listening skills. So, right, just not just hearing someone when they speak, but really listening. And whether that's with a patient, a client, a guest, or if you're in clinical rounds when someone else is speaking, the nurse, the speech pathologist, really engaging those listening skills and being intentional, asking questions, and when you don't know, just really admitting to it rather than going on pretending that you do. And we'll get into this in a little bit, but that has to do with more of a performance focus rather than a learning focus when you don't ask questions. Being open-minded, very important, kind of some mental flexibility there. And then lastly, just being professional, which, I know Dr. Bush and Dr. Hilpert, all the professors there really push for. And it's critical. It's critical in the way you form your emails, all the way to the way you communicate with someone virtually or in person. You always want to try embody professionalism. Okay. So let's start to talk about now a growth mindset. So let's get into the weeds of a growth mindset. A growth mindset was developed by Dr. Carol Dweck and is based on a body of research and literature that she has done in the early 1970s. And it's also called incremental implicit theory. It's defined as the belief that personal characteristics, such as your intellect and talent, can be changed or developed. However, on the other side of the coin is a fixed mindset, also known as entity implicit theory. And this is defined as the belief that personal characteristics such as talent and intellect are unmodifiable, saying that the way you were born, the way that you think, the way that you learn, the talents that you have, the skills that you have, the abilities you have are fixed and that they cannot be changed, they cannot be improved upon, they cannot be increased, anything like that. That's a fixed mindset. And so people are seen as naturally gifted, smart, or inherently skilled that leads to their success rather than effort. And so today's focus is going to be on a growth mindset and how that can be applied to your dietetics journey, both really as from undergraduate through your rotations into your professional career. So there are five main points I want everyone to take away from this slide here. And that's having a growth mindset in the presence of challenges, obstacles, effort, criticism and feedback, and the success of others. Namely, what I want everyone to focus on is embracing challenges, persisting despite obstacles, seeing effort as a path to mastery, learning from criticism and feedback, and being inspired by others. If you're a note taker, that's great to hear. I hope you're taking notes because this is the place to do it. And these are the key takeaways that you want to have in your back pocket when faced with situations that are difficult or challenging. Embrace challenges, persist despite obstacles, see effort as a path to mastery, learn from criticism and feedback, and be inspired by the success of others. One of the greatest misconceptions about success is that it should look effortless, that it should all happen behind the scenes. And when you show up, it should look like magic to everyone else, that you were able to do X, Y, and Z, and that no one should ever see the process. No one should see the effort, the grind. And that's really just not true. It's really a lie. And it's actually one of the hallmarks of a fixed mindset. It directly leads into what's called low effort syndrome. And low effort syndrome is the belief that if perfection isn't guaranteed, you shouldn't even try at all. And this can be detrimental to your educational journey and career. In a fixed mindset, a fixed mindset, excuse me, is terrifying. First, because geniuses are not supposed to somehow, quote unquote, try. It should just come naturally to them. And with a fixed mindset, you have some sort of a built-in excuse, right? If you fail, but it really takes a lot of guts, without a lack of for lack of a better word, to say that I gave it my all and it still wasn't enough. But to then pick yourself back up and keep moving forward. And that's one of the main messages, is that it's okay to fail as long as you were focusing on the learning process and not so much on performance. We'll get into that in a slide or two. But again, so the main points here are: embrace challenges, persist despite obstacles, see effort as a path to mastery, so important, learning from criticism and feedback, even though it's not fun, and being inspired by the success of others. So let's start to break apart fixed mindset and a growth mindset, and what they look like. So on the left-hand side, we have fixed mindset examples. And then on the right-hand side, we have growth mindset examples, replacing the fixed mindset phrases. So something along the lines of, I'll never learn this. I'll never learn this. Maybe you've experienced this in regards to, the Krebs cycle, right? And advanced nutrition 1 or 2, or something along those lines, some sort of complicated conceptual process or physiological process, or whatever the case may be. You've said at one point to yourself, I'm just never going to get this. This is for someone else. I'm not built for this. My mind doesn't work that way. I think we've all maybe said phrases like that to ourselves, but it needs to be replaced with, I can do this, I just need to practice. That shift is so important. It changes your entire mindset. It changes even the trajectory of your learning process and how you're going to approach challenges in the future. Another example, that student doesn't even work as hard as I do and still gets praised. Again, this goes back to championing others, or being, or backing others, and being happy for their success, being inspired by others' success. And so you would want to change that over to, good for her. She's really come a long way. And not getting so upset about what someone else is getting and something that you're not getting, or feeling that that individual doesn't even deserve what they're getting. And that should not be the focus. A fixed mindset says, I'm too old for that. Those years are gone. That's for someone younger. That's not going to happen anymore. But a growth mindset says, learning this new skill could be fun, and I'm ready for the challenge and running right at it. That's going to be another one of the key messages for today, is that when there's a challenge or an obstacle, you have to go right at it. You can't go around it. You can't go under it. You can't go over it. You have to go right through it, and guarantee you will come out on the other side better. And then lastly here, I know that I'm doing this well. I don't need to be evaluated. And that really cuts the learning process off right there. And so you want to switch that over to, I'm sure there's an area for improvement. Please teach me. So, if you're an undergraduate, if you're going into your rotations, whatever the case may be, in professors, preceptors, mentors in your life, you want to embrace them as a resource and take on the recommendations and the guidelines that they provide you, and the tips, because it's so important to be just a sponge your entire life. Even now, as I do it myself, it's important that I'm open to feedback, open to criticism, open to constructive criticism, open to all those things so I can learn and get better, which is really the name of the game. So let's talk about what a growth mindset is not. For starters, a growth mindset is what it's not is a false growth mindset. This is something that Dr. Carol Dweck has coined. So a false growth mindset, sort of believing that you start hearing about believing that a growth mindset is about open-mindedness and just being flexible and then attaching yourself to those things. Like, oh yeah, I'm totally open-minded. I have a growth mindset. It is not something that happens passively that you just have and have never worked for. A growth mindset requires intentional, active pursuit. It is not something that you just already have and you attach yourself to it. Name also because you don't have it all the time. It really depends. It depends on your emotional state, environment, past experiences, and all those things culminate into this one situation where now you have a choice to apply growth mindset or remain in a false or remain in a fixed mindset. And so, that's one misconception about a growth mindset is that you hear that it has certain characteristics and you think, oh, I already have those. Well, no, not necessarily, not if you haven't been working on them. And then the second here is a growth mindset is focused on praise and reward. And I will give everyone the title of the book, the most recent book by Dr. Carol Dweck that you can read on your own time if you like. This is kind of taken from that book in regards to, especially in child rearing. Actually, there's a whole chapter there in regards to child rearing. But that it's just focused on praise and reward. That's not necessarily true. Outcomes can still matter. However, the emphasis is on learning and the growing process. Completing your SEL hours and satisfying your competencies is still essential. We have goals here. However, a growth mindset focuses on the learning process with the end goal in mind. And this is also an area where grit comes into play as well. But it's not focused on just performance and just the competencies and looking really good and being top of the class. It's not about that. And then lastly, a growth mindset is a guarantee for success. And that's certainly not the case at all. As a dietetic student, you're going to encounter difficulties even as you apply a growth mindset. But even though you encounter these difficulties or challenges with a growth mindset, you're better prepared for them and to get through them. And then even after in the reflection process with a growth mindset, can better reflect on those experiences and apply what happened then to current or future situations. So let's talk a little bit about growth mindset research. We're just going to touch on this a little bit just to see what's going out there, what's going on in the research field. So Klein and colleagues examined pharmacy trainees and found those with fixed mindsets that made medical errors were more likely to justify the error or blame someone else. So at first glance, this doesn't really seem like it applies to dietetic students. However, if you replace medical errors with ADIME errors, it's certainly now more applicable. And so those with fixed mindsets are so focused on performance that they're willing to pass the blame onto someone else. Whereas with a growth mindset, you take extreme ownership over your faults, your mistakes, your weaknesses, embrace them, and then look to correct them. Dawson and Fox expressed concern that due to competitive nature in dentistry and other health profession academics, that instructors were only messengers for what would be on a test. Again, this goes back to just being performance based and not focusing on the learning process. Increased focus on performance is found with those with fixed mindsets, and those with growth mindsets are not as afraid to fail and look vulnerable in front of others. Bronstein and Chien redesigned traditional nutrition education and counseling course to promote skill building and a growth mindset. Preliminary results showed acquisition of growth mindset characteristics. It's also a good research study there as well in more of a formal setting specific to dietetics. I'm currently working with Dr. Bronstein actually on a qualitative growth mindset research right now. So hopefully keep an eye out for that later this year. And then one of the last points I want to make here is that several studies have found a positive correlation between the growth mindset and grit. And grit is defined as persistence and passion for long-term goals. And so they seem to run in tandem with one another. And so that's something to keep in mind too. We don't have time to go into really grit today, but just something to keep in your back pocket that while you implement a growth mindset, that grit has been shown to be equally important. So let's start to look into some practical applications. So this is all great, right? Setting up the principles of a growth mindset and kind of what it looks like theoretically, but how do we use it on a daily basis? So first and foremost, as you enter into your rotations or your practicums, for start, you have to love the challenge. You have to embrace it with your full mind, your full heart. You have to go run right at challenges and almost start to see them as fun, really, in a way. Even when they point out your most vulnerable areas of dietetics, you have to run right at them. And it's fun because you know you're about to learn a lot because the situation has called for it. So you are now in demand to learn something new or to improve a skill. You have to believe in the effort. Believing in the effort is so important that it's not going to look effortless. Don't try and mask the process. Embrace the effort, and if someone sees how hard you're working, that's a good thing. Show resilience in the face of setbacks. There's certainly going to be plenty of setbacks. I've been in your shoes before, and you just have to keep moving forward. And I think this is an area where grit really comes into play. Embrace feedback. Again, this is not fun. This is an area of weakness that someone is pointing out. Giving constructive criticism can be a tough pill to swallow. But if you're focused on learning, then it should be welcomed. Championing one another. If you're an undergraduate student, if you're going to be entering rotations, everyone's in different locations doing rotations, maybe nationwide, wherever you may be, find ways to connect with one another and champion one another and embrace the success of others and congratulate them. It's really important and an aspect of growth mindset. And then lastly here, this one's for grit, is just keeping the end goal in mind as you go into your clinical rotations, community, food service rotations, and all the other areas. So I was very nervous for my clinical rotations, especially in the area of nutrition support and doing the calculations. But I had to really just run at those challenges. And, I am here now as a registered dietitian, so I would say I succeeded. And so just keep that in mind moving forward that, it's going to come up, but you're going to take it head on. So I want to talk about the power of not yet. So this is something that Dr. Carol Dweck talks about, the power of the phrase not yet. If someone were to ask you if you've completed XYZ or do you know how to do XYZ, don't just respond with no. Respond with not yet. That little shift is very important. When you respond with not yet, you open up learning opportunities. So, for example, have you seen a modified barium swallow? Not yet. Do you know how to do a caloric and protein prescription of a patient with stage 3 pressure injury and stage 2 chronic kidney disease? Not yet. Do you know the most commonly purchased foods using SNAP benefits in this county? Not yet. There's going to be a lot of not yets. Over time, they will get smaller, but you just need to be honest about your shortcomings and express current and future efforts to improve. Preceptors like to see that, and down the line, supervisors, managers, bosses like to see that. Not yet means that you use your grit and resources to find the answers. And then, this way of thinking just can lead to greater confidence and determination to persevere. And so I recommend everyone start using not yet and kind of start taking no out of your vocabulary and respond in response to these opportunities to learn. And you have to you over time you will get better at seeing where those opportunities lie, those learning opportunities. So important. So let's go over some quick tips here. And this is going to be pretty hard hitting. But the first is stop focusing on how you will be judged and just concentrating on improving. In a world with a lot of anxiety, uh, it's difficult to implement this first quick tip, thinking that all eyes are on you. When in a lot of cases, they're really not. But your mind gets just running way ahead of you. It gets going, and you start thinking that everyone's judging you and they expected X, Y, and Z from you, and you're not delivering, and it doesn't look good, and everyone's seeing your process, how hard you're working, and you're supposed to be, this sort of student, you're supposed to be this, sort of perfect, intern or perfect student in the rotations, and that's really just not the case. Focus on improving, focus on learning, and turn inward. And be a risk taker. Put yourself out there when the learning opportunities come knocking. You're going to be in rotations, you're going to be in a classroom setting, and no one's really going to want to step forward, but that's going to be you. You need to be the one to step forward. If you're doing rounds in a clinical setting and you have information on a patient that the team will need, you need to step forward and speak up. And yes, it's definitely nerve-wracking, but being a risk taker is so important. De-emphasize performance and emphasize learning. I'm sure you're getting sick of me talking about it at this point, but it's not just about the grades. If you make it about the grades, it will lead you down a path of great disappointment. I've been in those areas myself. You have to focus on the learning and the growth. Those grades and those competencies there, yes, are there to provide sort of an objective, quantitative evaluation if you're ready to move on to whatever the next step is, the next level. But if you focus on the learning, you will meet those. Expect to make mistakes, but also expect to overcome them too. Uh, Sitting around fearing making mistakes is not going to be helpful to anyone. Expect that they're going to come, but also expect that you have the capability to overcome them. Again, stop trying to look right and just be vulnerable. To say, I don't know, not yet, I haven't learned that yet. You just need to step out of your comfort zone and stretch yourself. There's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. Something important to keep in mind. And overall, performance is for others, but learning is for you. Keep that in mind as well. And don't simply seek challenges, but thrive in them. Again, this kind of goes back to seeing them as a fun challenge, and because you're excited that you're going to learn something new. Okay. Well, actually, I'll say thank you here, but I do want to get into my final thoughts section and some more maybe personal advice. So in 2022, I did have the privilege to present on a growth mindset at Fenty 2022 in Orlando, Florida. And, I have to say, looking back now, this was really made possible by professors like Dr. Hilper and Dr. Bush, who were willing to provide me with honest feedback every semester, every course. And in the end, it was always up to me to take that feedback, self-reflect, and then go and apply those changes. And almost taking myself out of the equation and realizing I'd rather be effective rather than comfortable. And so I needed to look at my areas of weakness, my shortcomings, be vulnerable, show my efforts. And it has led to a lot of great things. And one of those things being this presentation at Fenty, which was a great opportunity. I look forward to more opportunities like this. And it's possible for everyone in this classroom to reach these sorts of levels. And I believe a growth mindset has helped me to get there. And something that Dr. Bush used to say all the time, and I'm sure she does, that genuinely has stuck with me since my time at Oneonta is you do not grow in the easy. When it's difficult is when you are growing. This kind of goes back to there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. And so just trying to make those challenges fun, embrace the learning, focus on that rather than just performance, and expecting to make mistakes, but then also expecting to correct them as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I've been in all of your shoes. It's difficult. I also have so much of my own career ahead of me that I am sure I'm going to stumble in a lot of areas. But with a growth mindset, I'll be better prepared to handle them. And so I just want to give a couple words of encouragement to everyone in the classroom. It can be difficult, it can be daunting, sometimes staying up until the middle of the night. Don't forget, I'm also a doctoral student at the current time. So I am doing that part-time. It's a part-time program as I work towards my doctorate. I know what it's like to be a student and now also working full time. And it just takes a lot of growth mindset and grit. So just keep moving forward, enjoy the process, and it will be worth it. So thank you for everyone for attending today. Here's my contact information, my personal phone number. If you want to text me or call me, I'm always happy to work with students. If you just almost need words of encouragement. I know we haven't met face to face, but I'm always happy to help you through. You can email me, or if you want to look me up on LinkedIn, you're happy to do that. Excuse me, you're welcome to do that. And so that's how my name is listed in LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn sometimes a little tough to navigate, so you can find me there. So here are some additional resources. One of the things that you're going to be receiving today is a growth mindset infographic that I've made as a resource for all of you. In addition, the book that Dr. Carol Dweck most recently wrote was Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. So that it would be the recommended reading. It's not a very big book, and I think it has a wealth of information, can definitely change your perspective on a lot of things. And then if you're looking for some research studies, I've listed two here for you. So Mindsets in Health Professions Education, a scoping review. So this scoping review was conducted, and it details evidence of a growth mindset in different health professions, including nursing, veterinary, pharmacy, physiotherapy, and general health profession educations. And I think those results can also help to reflect dietetics. But there's not so much growth mindset research in dietetics fields, which I hope to correct later this year. And then grit, growth mindset, and deliberate practice in online learning. So that would be another resource for all of you for reading. And then as far as videos go, you can see Dr. Dweck's TED Talk, Developing a Growth Mindset with Carol Dweck, posted by Stanford alumni on YouTube. Or you can go ahead and see my Fenty 2022 presentation. And so that's titled Cultivating Growth Mindset, The Path Towards Continuous Improvement, and that's available at the Eat Right store. Okay. And then here we have some references for you. So in case you wanted to just follow up on some of the research studies, things that I had mentioned, those are there for you. And thank you. Thank you for attending. I hope you have a great summer. Hope you have a great dietetics journey. Please reach out if you need anything. I'm happy to assist. And go Red Dragons.